Hi, I'm Dan Kaplan, and welcome to Sock Quarantine Diaries, a new virtual video series presented by Simplify, where we take candid and intimate looks into the lives of security operations professionals as they deal with the current situation. From how they've helped to stand up a remote workforce to what happens to security operations when we're let out of lockdown, the conversations are truly revealing, and I hope you enjoy. All right, thanks, and welcome back to another episode of SOC Quarantine Diaries. Today, we are so honored to be joined by Dr. Rod Arthur, who is a level 3 SOC engineer at a company named Conduit, based in New Jersey, but obviously has a global presence. Rod, thanks for joining us today on Quarantine Diaries.
Thank you for having me.
Rod, first of all, I've been asking folks, of course, most importantly, is how are you doing? How are you coping with the extended quarantine? We're already a remote worker, which we'll talk about, but how are you doing?
I'm doing fine. I get a little stir crazy sometimes from being in the house all the time and working, but you get used to it. I don't mind being home. I'm not really a person that goes out that much to bars and things like that. So I don't mind being home, but once in a while I do like to get out and get some air and see people for a change.
You're located in the upstate New York region, right? And we're talking on a Saturday morning in May. And I know there was some snow in the region this morning, of all things. Did anything affect you? It probably is cold up there, right?
Cold it is, yes. As far as snow, I saw a little ice on top of my shed, but honestly, it's dry. I think the further north you go, like toward Albany, is when you hit all that the terrible wintry weather.
Yeah.
But Middletown, I live in Middletown, New York, and I think that the reason they call it Middletown is because we sit an hour and a half in between Albany and an hour and a half in between New York City. So I kind of get the best of both worlds. I get the bad weather sometimes from further north, and then I get some of the nicer weather from New York City and vice versa.
Yeah, that's nice. Yeah, no, the reason I brought it up is because there was some cities along the Northeast experienced some snow this morning, of all things, on May. Although who knows what day it is or what month it is, so it doesn't feel like snow in May, even though it's snow in May. Anyway, but again, thanks for joining us. And I'm talking to folks to try to get an idea about SOC professionals who are in the trenches and obviously dealing with kind of this new reality of forced work from home and kind of some of the issues that are arising because of it. My guess would be that Conduit had a lot of and probably has its share of remote employees, but it's workers who entered offices, or for the most part now, you've seen a surge in remote work, I would guess.
Yes, yeah. I think that, and probably more so for the IT support folks, the hardest thing was getting so many people to working from home from VPN, because it puts a strain on the VPN concentrators, and then you end up having performance problems because you have everyone hitting the VPN appliances, and lucky Conduit is a larger company, so it was much. I'm sure it was a challenge. I wasn't in on that, except for that I was privy to some of the how do you put it? Maybe some of the firewall rules to make sure that that the right protocols might have been used for access. But other than that, it seems like it was pretty seamless. It wasn't. It was complex, but it wasn't that bad to get all the folks on the VPN.
Yeah, so that's obviously one of the big parts of the phases of shifting to that larger remote workforce. Now, tell me about like what your day to day involves, just in general, and maybe a little bit about the company itself.
Well, the company is an offshoot of Xerox. They were the business arm of Xerox, the printing giant, and apparently Conduent branched off from Xerox and became a multi-billion-dollar company separately from Xerox. So um, there is some business I believe that probably still goes on between them, but I'm not privy to all the information that goes on. Of course, I wouldn't be able to discuss it anyway. But you know, Conduit is a pretty large company. They're large. They're a global company. You know, in probably 45 different countries. And I myself, as an InfoSec level 3 engineer, I have different responsibilities. I do some threat hunting. I also am responsible for the traffic, the firewall rules. The traffic is allowing, you know, certain traffic in and out of the environment. Integrations, security, vulnerability assessments, things like that.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, and it sounds like you, especially being at level 3, you get to do beyond the rudimentary, mundane stuff. You're kind of actively a big part of the, you know, the detection and response piece. Tell me a little bit how your role has maybe adapted to the current situation at hand. Have you been called on to do new duties? Have what you're experiencing, has it changed a lot?
I would say the biggest change has been basically, I guess, the onboarding of more folks into remote work. You know, it also you start to see more alerts. You know, with the Sims, because you know people could be using VDIs and things like that, and you get a lot of false positives, which you think may be intrusions or not necessarily intrusions, but of course you have to address them just to be on the safe side. So you do see more alerts and more false positives, of course, because of people forgetting probably to change their passwords and letting the passwords expire and stuff like that. You know.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And false positives probably were already a bit of a scourge for you and your colleagues, and now that's only escalated. So how are you coping with that? Because all of that stuff needs to be attended to, right?
Yeah, I mean, you have to be able to multitask in cyber, because you know you may have breaches, and then you have other responsibilities like such as vulnerability assessments, could be penetration testing. So you have to basically be able to multitask, and then also work with your colleagues. You know, communication is very important. You know, it's a global company, and there's times when you know something I may not be able to handle. One time I may have to to contact one of my team members to help me or for advice. So the important thing is communication between the team members. That's the key.
Yeah, and you know, I would imagine that some organizations, not yours, because it sounds like there was a hybrid between folks who were on site within a physical dedicated SOC, and then folks who were off site, remote SOCing. So it sounds like it hasn't been an adjustment for everyone, you included, but for those maybe who it has been an adjustment for within the SOC team. How are they finding things? You know, you mentioned the collaboration. No longer can they walk over to their colleague and tap on their shoulder.
Well, I mean, as far as the team I work for, they're all very experienced, and from my understanding, no one's really had much issues adapting to the work environment. You know, like I said, the important thing is collaboration. We all collaborate, so you know that way it takes the heat off of some people having to do but so much on the team. So really, that's been no problem whatsoever. I can't speak for other companies. Not every company, operates, entirely, like we do.
Yeah, and sure, and then so I would assume the answer to this will be a whole lot of nothing. But generally, how do you find the morale of your team? Again, some of those who have been disrupted maybe from their usual routine and are obviously confronting some new challenges. How is everyone doing?
Honestly, we're fine. I mean, the guys I work with, the team I work with, they're very down to earth folks, and we've had no problem whatsoever. We communicate on a regular basis. We have our weekly meetings, and in some cases daily meetings, depending on what we're working on. Everyone communicates. It's all depends on the team, on how these things work. I've worked with companies where teams were not so cohesive. But I must say, in my case, the team I work with, it's a great team. The cohesive, everyone works together.
Yeah.
No problem whatsoever. I can say.
Yeah, and security folks, as a result, have to be in a just because of the challenges that they face, right? Have to be an adaptive bunch. So not surprising that they, for the most part, I'm sure, are taking this kind of as it comes, right? Because you never know, even on the most normal of circumstances, you never know what a Tuesday will bring you, right? So, tell me a little bit about. So you mentioned some of the the VPN stuff, but what approach is the company taking to ensure that your remote workforce is set up and secure as folks begin, and they probably have begun already, but continue to work from home? Kind of, is it like a phased approach to getting people going?
I would think it definitely was a phased approach. Not at this point right now, everyone is there's sort of a phased approach to go back into the office because now the curve has started to uh, whatever I guess it's starting to level out. So now the idea is starting to is they're looking to get back in the office. But as far as the approach to get everyone on the VPN and work remotely, it was a phased approach. Um, depending on where they were also, because some different countries may have been hit harder than others. So in some cases, it might have been a little bit of a rush, but for the most part, yeah, I work with a good bunch of folks and very experienced. It was more of a phased approach, and it was worked out fine actually.
Yeah, I'm sure they're, and I don't know if you're privy to this or if this would be something you would be exposed to, but I'm sure there's stories or there's some interesting data security malfeasance, maybe accidental, going on. Folks who are working from home, maybe putting data they shouldn't be on their, storing it locally or something like that. Have there been any kind of uh, 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 issues like that happening that you're aware of?
I haven't seen that, and that's the thing. I'm more in the
Incursions. That was
architecture.
the word I was looking for. Incursions.
Gotcha. Well, the thing about it is I'm more on the security architecture side. You have, I mean, it's a pretty large company. You have the cyber guys who go in who look entirely into incident response. I'm more on the architecture side, but I do some threat hunting, and my biggest issues is just is maybe someone they may have logged into a resource a server and maybe they didn't change the password, and then uh, there's an automated task still running under the old credentials, and more of a false positive kind of thing. So that's most of what I see as far as of anything that's out of the norm. Is maybe you might see one server getting hit with thousands and thousands of logins, and basically it's just the automated task that's running. As far as intrusions, of course, I can't go into detail about anything I might have seen, being that we have a lot of government contracts. But whatever intrusions we may have seen has been handled by our SIMs, of course.
Yeah, and we were talking before we got on a little bit about some of the user awareness that's probably needed to be emphasized a little bit more now that folks are working from home more. Social engineering, phishing, obviously, is a top vehicle for delivery of malicious assets to a company. How are you? Are you? I guess I'm asking if you're seeing any more of that and what you're doing, and you're probably not involved with it, but what are you doing to educate the user population?
Well, most companies like this company, like Conduent, they have user awareness training. So all employees are privy to that training at least once or twice a month. So we definitely take advantage of user awareness training because of course a company being so large, you know, a person's not aware that they can be targeted for phishing campaigns.
Right.
But the company basically tries to offset that by user awareness training, which is required across the board.
Yeah. Has the obviously there's the increased risk of phishing, potentially, because folks are remote, and obviously we're seeing cyber criminals are leveraging the current pandemic to trick folks into doing things that they shouldn't do. From a malware, from a threat hunting perspective or a malware perspective, are you seeing anything interesting out there?
Well, I definitely see more ransomware attempts. That's for sure. WannaCry is still out there, believe it or not. Even though there's different versions of ransomware out there besides WannaCry. WannaCry is still out there,
Yeah.
and there's different versions of the ransomware. What these cyber criminals do is they may use code from the prior ransomware, but then they improve on it. That kind of thing, you know. So you see a lot of that. You see a lot of Trojan attempts, I would say, where, well, in other words, you may have a person that some users might go to a site they shouldn't go to and try to chat something, but of course the SIM will catch it, you know. So you get those little things once in a while, but definitely you see more ransomware attempts that's out there.
Yeah. And have you seen those getting escalated more now with considering that they have something, they have COVID-19, right? That's a very popular thing to sort of lean on in a lot of these schemes, right? To use that
Yeah.
as your to leverage.
Well, yeah. What some cyber actors will do is they'll send a phishing email uh, regarding COVID and trying to prompt you to click on a link, regarding maybe some medication and things like that. And of course, if the person is not thinking, then they will click on the link, and then of course, if, they may trigger an executable, but usually the SIM will catch it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and you, I guess I'm interested in kind of going forward. Now, you mentioned, some of these stay-at-home orders are being lifted. Folks are going to be returning to the offices. I would imagine that would include the security operations folks who are actually seated within your physical SOCs at Conduit. But you mentioned how kind of the process hasn't been maybe as harried as you may have thought. So could we see some sort of paradigm shift happening, both for remote SOCs and also just the general rank and file? Are we going to start seeing more remote work?
Oh, for sure, definitely. Because a lot of companies, up until this pandemic, a lot of companies really were not that high on remote work and things like that. But I think that this pandemic has opened the eyes of a lot of corporations, because the last I read not too long ago, where I was hearing that 74% of companies will not allow their entire workforce into the office. So I think what's going to happen is we're going to see a lot of these companies start segmenting, how many people come into the office at one time, also, of course, for the social distancing thing, and then also the companies are seeing that they can still be productive without having everyone in the office. And then also there's a cost savings. There's the subject of saving on rent and space and other things around the
Yeah.
organizations. Now, if anything, who's going to suffer are going to be the builders and developers, because the companies won't need as much space anymore.
Yeah, and as someone who pays a hefty rent to live in New York, obviously, if you want to operate here as a business, it costs quite a bit. And yeah, I mean, it would be tough to sort of justify, I think, the big buying big office space for workers if they could work fine from home. Okay, so if that's going to happen, and maybe Conduit itself sees more remote workers permanently, what does that mean for security operations? What does that mean for your team?
Well, I'm sure it's going to mean a lot more work in regards to user awareness training, because the biggest worry will be, you know, the users, you know, what sites are they going to using their organization device? You know, that's going to be one of the biggest issues that we have to worry about, and of course, making sure that they are aware of what sites they're going to, and not to click on certain links,
Yeah.
and then bring that back into the organization. So of course, you know, it will be a matter of making sure that our systems are patched, and making sure that those devices also are constantly patched. Does
Yeah,
that make
and
sense?
so could we get to a point where there's home scanning of or vulnerability scanning of home networks if folks are relying on those to work from home? Maybe maybe that happens already, but maybe that would be something that would be.
I would think that most organizations, as far as scanning, you don't want to run a scan like during production time. That's the thing, really. So most of those scans probably run mostly overnight on
Mhm.
to make sure that there's nothing out there. But what they probably will do is have some sort of SIM probably that may scan some of these individual devices to make sure that there's nothing on them. You know.
What about VPNs? Obviously, attackers are um, searching around for flaws more than they probably were in the past. You got to make sure those are patched as well, right?
Yeah, I think that's one of the scariest things is when a user might decide they're going to work, you know, out of a Starbucks, and things like that, and you have to worry about what Wi-Fi they're connecting to. Though the VPN should offset that, because you know once you log into the VPN, then you're going through a tunnel, so it's encrypted. But you do hope and you know that maybe the person won't go into their computer and get onto the the wireless network out there, without of course first going on to the VPN. And that's why what a lot of companies are doing is that if you don't log into the VPN, then you're not going to get on the internet. That's the way that particular OS build on that laptop is going to be set up, you
Hmm.
know, where unless you log into the VPN first, you're not going to be able to go into the internet until you log into that VPN to make sure that any information that's going back and forth between your device and the company's service is encrypted. So
Yeah.
that's the biggest issue.
No, that's great, and I would imagine that there's going to be quite a bit more of or continued at least reassessments of ensuring that you and your team have the visibility you need into any surge in remote workers and what they're doing and identifying security gaps. Let's close with something you brought up earlier, which was the collaboration within the team. Have there been any changes to kind of that communication structure within the team as a result of this?
Yeah, I would think that since the SOC team is mostly remote, the important thing is communication between all team members. That the important thing is to have weekly and in some cases daily, you know, stand-up meetings and discussing, you know, what you're seeing and whatever projects you're working with, because you're not sitting next to the person anymore. So the important thing when it comes to remote work is communication, and that's where you have your Skype, you have your Microsoft Teams, you have Zoom, things like that. So that's the important thing is communication between all team members and collaboration through these technologies that enable us to do so.
Yeah, and we haven't talked about Simplify, the company that I work for. We make security orchestration, automation, and response SOAR technology, which helps in that collaboration component. But it also helps to like automate things. You know, all these incessant alerts and needs for cases. So I guess I'll officially close with asking you. You're level 3, so you get to do a lot of the more interesting stuff, right? The more critical thinking stuff that I think a lot of folks maybe who are on that tier 1 level are probably envious about. But can you just generally talk to me about maybe the need for automation within the SOC in general?
Yeah, the thing is, when you try to manually perform some of these duties, you're going to miss things. There's just too much data that's going in and out of an organization. That's another thing that, you know, a lot of companies don't focus on what's also leaving the environment. You have to understand what's leaving your environment as well as what's coming into your environment. So
Yeah.
it's important to have some sort of an automated SIM that also that analyzes the outgoing traffic as well, because something can get into your environment, and they could be siphoning data out of your environment. So you have to also look at what's going up besides what's coming in. So
Yeah.
automation is very important. It's just too much. It's just too much data for someone to try to do manually.
Yeah, and the exfiltration alerts are probably the ones that make your heart skip a beat, I'm sure. Uh,
Yeah.
Rod, I love these conversations so much because I get to pick the brains of folks who are dealing with this, who are seeing it firsthand, right? So I really appreciate you joining us, and I really wish you the best of luck. You're used to this remote grind. I'm sure a lot of folks are continuing to get used to it if they will ever, but we're certainly in interesting times now. So your perspective is much valued. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely, and best of luck. All right, everyone. We'll talk to you again soon on SOC Quarantine Diaries.